Betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those closest to you, the person sitting across from you at dinner, the colleague who knows your secrets, the friend who holds your trust like a loaded weapon, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. You think you're safe because you've built walls against strangers. But the assassin is already inside the castle, wearing the face of loyalty, speaking the language of friendship. While you scan the horizon for threats, the knife is being sharpened behind your back by hands you've held, voices you've trusted, eyes that have looked into yours and smiled. Most people discover betrayal the same way they discover cancer, when it's already metastasized, when the damage is done, when the relationships are poisoned, the reputation destroyed, the foundation cracked beyond repair. They spend their lives wondering how they missed the signs that were hiding in plain sight. You think loyalty protects you, but in truth, it blinds you. Your capacity to trust becomes your greatest vulnerability. Your willingness to believe becomes the rope they use to hang you. Every secret you share, every weakness you reveal, every moment of genuine connection becomes ammunition in their arsenal. The uncomfortable truth is this: betrayal is not random. It follows patterns. It leaves breadcrumbs. It announces itself through subtle shifts in behavior that most people dismiss as coincidence or imagination. But those who understand the psychology of betrayal can see the storm gathering long before the first lightning strikes. Right now, someone in your circle might be preparing to betray you. They're weighing the cost and benefit. They're rehearsing justifications. They're creating distance so the inevitable strike won't feel personal. They're studying your weaknesses like a general studies enemy fortifications. The question isn't whether betrayal will touch your life. It's whether you'll see it coming or be blindsided by someone you trusted completely. The person who betrays you won't be wearing a villain's mask. They'll be wearing your friend's face, speaking in your confidant's voice, carrying your secrets like weapons they're about to use against you. In the next few minutes, you'll learn to recognize the 3 unmistakable signs that someone is preparing to betray you. These aren't theories or speculation. They're psychological patterns that have played out across centuries of human deception. Master them and you'll never again be caught off guard by the cruelest cut of all, the wound inflicted by someone you trusted. You think betrayal begins with hatred. In truth, it begins with silence. And that silence is speaking to you right now, if you know how to listen. Section 2. The nature of betrayal. 600 words. To understand betrayal, you must first understand why it cuts deeper than any enemy's blade. When a stranger attacks you, they wound your body or your circumstances. But when someone close betrays you, they wound your soul. They don't just take something from you, they steal your ability to trust your own judgment. Betrayal is the psychological equivalent of being poisoned by your own blood. The person who betrays you doesn't just break a promise or violate a trust. They shatter your fundamental belief that you can distinguish friend from foe. They transform every past kindness into a question mark, every shared moment into potential manipulation. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote about the shadow, the dark aspects of human nature that people refuse to acknowledge in themselves, but readily project onto others. The person preparing to betray you isn't necessarily evil in the classical sense. They're often someone wrestling with their own inadequacies, their own fears, their own desperate hunger for power or validation. Your success, your happiness, your very existence becomes a mirror reflecting back everything they hate about themselves. Nietzsche observed that resentment is the most dangerous of all emotions because it festers, in darkness, growing stronger in silence. Your future betrayer doesn't wake up one morning deciding to destroy you. They accumulate grievances like interest on debt. Every promotion you receive, every relationship that thrives, every moment of genuine joy becomes evidence of what they lack. Machiavelli, the master of political psychology, recognized that betrayal is often a calculated business decision disguised as personal conflict. The person planning to betray you has performed a cold cost-benefit analysis. Your trust in them has become more valuable as a weapon than as a relationship. Your loyalty to them has become a weakness to exploit rather than a bond to honor. This is why betrayal feels like identity collapse. When someone close to you reveals they've been wearing a mask, you don't just lose them, you lose your confidence in your ability to see clearly. You begin to question every interaction, every gesture of friendship, every moment of vulnerability. The betrayer doesn't just steal your trust in them, they steal your trust in yourself. Your enemy can only wound you once, but betrayal poisons you for years. It creates what psychologists call hypervigilance, a state where you're constantly scanning for threats, constantly questioning motives, constantly bracing for the next blow. The betrayer's greatest victory isn't the immediate damage they cause, it's the way they make you doubt everyone who comes after them. But here's what most people don't understand. Betrayal follows predictable patterns because human psychology follows predictable patterns. The person preparing to betray you must first prepare themselves psychologically. They must create emotional distance to make the betrayal feel justified. They must gather information to make the betrayal effective. They must test boundaries to gauge your vulnerability. Most importantly, they must convince themselves that you deserve what's coming. This is where the signs become visible to those who know how to look. The future betrayer begins treating you differently, not because they've suddenly decided to hurt you, but because they're gradually building the psychological framework that will allow them to hurt you without feeling like a monster. Understanding this transforms you from victim to observer. When you recognize that betrayal is a process, not an event, you can start identifying the stages before they reach their destructive conclusion. The person who will betray you tomorrow is already behaving differently today, if you know what to watch for. You think trust is weakness. In truth, blind trust is suicide. And the difference between the two will determine whether you're the one holding the knife or the one feeling its blade. The first sign someone is preparing to betray you isn't dramatic. It's not a heated argument or open hostility. It's the gradual, almost imperceptible withdrawal of their loyalty, like watching someone slowly step backwards in a crowded room until they're no longer standing beside you. Picture this. You're in a meeting and someone criticizes your idea. In the past, your trusted colleague would have immediately defended you or offered supportive counterpoints. Now they remain silent, studying their hands or checking their phone. When you look at them expectantly, they offer a weak smile and say nothing. This isn't neutrality. This is rehearsal for abandonment. The person preparing to betray you will begin creating emotional and psychological distance through what appears to be passive behavior. They stop volunteering to help with your projects. They become mysteriously busy when you need support. They start responding to your messages with delays that feel calculated, not accidental. Each small withdrawal is a test. They're measuring how much they can distance themselves before you notice. Watch for the excuses that multiply like bacteria. Suddenly, they can't attend your important presentation because of a family emergency that seems to resolve remarkably quickly. They can't provide the recommendation you need because they're too swamped with their own work. They can't join you for the networking event because they're trying to maintain work-life balance. Each excuse sounds reasonable in isolation, but together they form a pattern of strategic unavailability. The psychological mechanism at work here is cognitive dissonance. Your future betrayer knows they're planning something that contradicts their public persona as your ally. To resolve this internal conflict, they must gradually convince themselves that you don't deserve their loyalty. This process requires them to rewrite your shared history, transforming your past kindnesses into manipulations, your successes into undeserved luck, your friendship into a burden they've been carrying too long. This is why their support becomes conditional and lukewarm. When they used to celebrate your victories with genuine enthusiasm, they now offer congratulations that feel hollow, almost forced. When you share exciting news, their response lacks the energy it once had. They're not being cruel, they're being practical. Emotional investment in someone you plan to destroy is psychologically exhausting. The most telling sign is their behavior in group settings. Notice who remains silent when your name comes up in conversation. Notice who fails to defend you when subtle criticisms are voiced. Notice who suddenly becomes very interested in their coffee cup when someone questions your judgment or character. The person preparing to betray you will begin practicing emotional detachment in public spaces, testing how it feels to let others attack you without intervention. This withdrawal serves multiple purposes for the future betrayer. First, it creates plausible deniability. They can claim they were simply being neutral or professional. Second, it begins conditioning others to see them as separate from you, making their eventual betrayal seem less shocking. Third, it allows them to observe how you handle decreased support, gathering intelligence about your vulnerabilities under pressure. When someone stops defending you in your absence, they are already rehearsing your downfall. They're practicing the emotional detachment they'll need to strike the final blow. Every time they remain silent while others criticize you, they're training themselves to feel less guilt about their planned betrayal. The cruelest aspect of this sign is how it exploits your positive qualities. Your loyalty makes you interpret their withdrawal as temporary stress or personal problems. Your empathy makes you offer them space and understanding precisely when you should be demanding answers. Your trust makes you dismiss the pattern as coincidence when you should be recognizing it as preparation. Most people only recognize this withdrawal in retrospect after the betrayal has occurred. They replay conversations and suddenly see how their former ally had been stepping away for months, creating the distance necessary to strike without feeling the full weight of their actions. But by then, the damage is done, the relationships are poisoned, and the betrayer has already moved on to their next target. The person who gradually stops investing in your success is not going through a rough patch. They're divesting from a relationship they plan to destroy. When loyalty becomes conditional, betrayal becomes inevitable. And when someone starts practicing life without you, while still claiming to be your friend, they're not preparing for your absence, they're preparing to cause it. You think distance is temporary. In truth, distance is preparation. And preparation always precedes execution. The second sign is perhaps the most insidious because it masquerades as intensified loyalty. The person preparing to betray you doesn't just maintain their facade, they amplify it. They become more agreeable, more complimentary, more eager to please than they've ever been. This isn't genuine affection deepening. This is psychological manipulation reaching its final stage. Consider the colleague who suddenly begins praising every decision you make, no matter how minor or questionable. They agree with your opinions before you've finished expressing them. They volunteer for tasks they previously avoided. They shower you with compliments that feel strangely excessive and oddly timed. You might feel flattered, but you should feel alarmed. This is the behavior of someone gathering intelligence while maintaining access. The psychology behind this pattern is both brilliant and disturbing. Your future betrayer understands that excessive agreeability serves multiple strategic purposes. First, it lowers your guard completely. When someone appears to worship your judgment, you naturally share more sensitive information, reveal more vulnerabilities, and expose more of your strategic thinking. Second, it allows them to study your decision-making processes up close, learning exactly how you think so they can anticipate your responses to their eventual attack. Watch how they agree with you. Genuine agreement comes with questions, suggestions, or personal anecdotes that build on your ideas. Strategic agreement is hollow. Quick nods, repeated phrases, enthusiastic validation without substance. They're not engaging with your thoughts, they're cataloging them. They're not contributing to your success, they're downloading your methods. This overcompliance serves another crucial function. It creates witnesses to their loyalty. When the betrayal eventually occurs, others will remember how supportive they seemed, making your accusations of betrayal appear paranoid or ungrateful. They're not just manipulating you, they're manipulating your entire social and professional network's perception of their character. The flattery becomes particularly dangerous because it targets your ego and your insecurities simultaneously. They praise your strengths in ways that encourage you to rely on them more heavily, while subtly highlighting areas where you might need support they're perfectly positioned to provide. They become indispensable by making themselves appear devoted, all while gathering the information they'll need to make themselves devastating. Notice the questions hidden within their compliments. You're so brilliant at reading people. How did you know that client would respond that way? They're not just praising your insight, they're learning your methodology. You handle pressure so well. What's your secret for staying calm in crisis? They're not admiring your composure, they're discovering your coping mechanisms so they can overwhelm them later. The most sophisticated betrayers will even create problems they can help you solve, establishing themselves as your go-to problem solver while simultaneously learning about your vulnerabilities under stress. They offer solutions that make you dependent on their continued support, all while gathering intelligence about how you operate when you're grateful, relieved, or temporarily weakened. Those who flatter the loudest often sharpen the knife the deepest. Genuine supporters offer balanced feedback. They celebrate your successes but also provide honest criticism when needed. Strategic flatterers provide only praise because they need your guard lowered, not your performance improved. They want you confident and unguarded, not strong and prepared. This phase of betrayal preparation can last months or even years, depending on the stakes involved. The betrayer is playing a long game, building your trust, while systematically cataloging everything they'll need to destroy you effectively. Every secret you share during this period becomes a weapon. Every weakness you reveal becomes a target. Every strategy you discuss becomes intelligence they can sell to your competitors or use against you directly. The psychological toll on the betrayer during this phase is significant, which is why they often overcompensate with excessive enthusiasm. Maintaining a false personality is exhausting, so they tend to overcorrect, becoming almost caricatures of loyalty and support. Their behavior becomes slightly too perfect, slightly too convenient, slightly too good to be true. Most people miss this sign because it feels good to be appreciated and supported. Your ego wants to believe their praise is genuine. Your heart wants to trust their apparent devotion. Your mind wants to accept their help without questioning motives. But this is precisely when you're most vulnerable to deception, when someone is giving you exactly what you want to hear and see. The person who suddenly becomes your biggest supporter without explanation isn't discovering your worth. They're calculating your value as a target. When someone's loyalty becomes performance art, betrayal isn't far behind. You think excessive praise means exceptional loyalty. In truth, excessive praise means exceptional danger. And the difference will determine whether you're being celebrated or being studied for destruction. The third and most dangerous sign occurs when your future betrayer begins playing a sophisticated game of information warfare, disguised as deepening intimacy. They start sharing personal details about their own life, vulnerabilities, fears, embarrassing stories, family problems, creating an atmosphere of mutual transparency that feels like friendship, but functions like espionage. This calculated vulnerability serves a specific purpose. It creates psychological pressure for you to reciprocate with equally personal information. The betrayer understands that humans are wired for reciprocity. When someone shares a secret with you, you feel obligated to share one in return. When they reveal a weakness, you're compelled to reveal yours. This isn't emotional bonding. This is data mining disguised as friendship. Watch how they share information about themselves. Genuine vulnerability comes with emotion, hesitation, and genuine trust building over time. Strategic vulnerability is different. It's delivered with just enough emotion to seem real but timed perfectly to elicit specific information from you. They might share a story about their financial struggles right before asking about your investment strategies, or reveal family drama before inquiring about your relationship challenges. The questions they ask during these intimate conversations are not random. They're systematically mapping your psychological landscape, identifying pressure points they can exploit later. They ask about your fears under the guise of offering support. They inquire about your relationships while pretending to care about your happiness. They probe your financial situation while appearing concerned about your stress levels. Notice the pattern in their curiosity. They want to know who else you trust so they can isolate you later. They ask about your backup plans so they can sabotage your alternatives. They inquire about your biggest fears so they can manifest them when the time comes. They explore your past failures so they can trigger your deepest insecurities. Every question is a reconnaissance mission. The most insidious aspect of this phase is how they use their own secrets as currency to purchase yours. They might reveal that they're having marriage problems, then ask how you maintain your relationships. They might confess to financial anxiety, then probe about your retirement planning. They might share workplace frustrations, then investigate your career ambitions. Each exchange feels equal, but they're trading worthless information for intelligence gold. This false intimacy also serves to isolate you from other relationships. When someone becomes your primary confidant, you naturally share less with others. This concentrated trust makes you more vulnerable because fewer people know what's really happening in your life. When the betrayal occurs, you'll have fewer allies who understand the full scope of what's been taken from you. The betrayer during this phase often becomes almost addicted to information gathering. They remember details about your life with uncanny precision, not because they care, but because they're building a comprehensive profile they can weaponize. They know your children's names, your parents' health issues, your mortgage details, your career goals, your relationship struggles. This knowledge makes them feel powerful and makes you feel understood. But understanding and caring are not the same thing. Honest men guard secrets. Betrayers collect them. A genuine friend might know many things about you, but they don't systematically catalog your vulnerabilities or probe for information that could hurt you. They don't remember your weaknesses with photographic precision while forgetting your strengths. They don't ask follow-up questions that feel slightly too probing or perfectly timed to exploit your emotional state. The psychological manipulation during this phase is particularly cruel because it exploits your basic human need for connection and understanding. You want to believe that someone genuinely cares about your inner world. You want to trust that your vulnerabilities are safe with someone who seems so open with their own. But the person preparing to betray you is using your deepest psychological needs as weapons against you. This information-gathering phase often accelerates as the betrayal approaches. The future betrayer becomes more insistent about checking in on you, more curious about your current projects, more interested in your immediate plans. They're not showing increased care. They're conducting final intelligence gathering before they strike. Most people realize too late that their most intimate conversations were actually interrogation sessions. They remember how good it felt to have someone who seemed so interested in their thoughts and feelings, only to discover that interest was strategic, not genuine. Every secret shared during this phase becomes evidence that can be twisted, ammunition that can be used, or leverage that can be applied when you're most vulnerable. The person who suddenly wants to know everything about you isn't falling in love with your complexity. They're falling in love with your exploitability. And that love will transform into betrayal the moment it serves their purposes. You think transparency builds trust. In truth, strategic transparency builds advantage. And that advantage always comes at your expense. To protect yourself from betrayal, you must understand the psychological machinery that creates betrayers. These are not random acts of cruelty. They are the predictable outcomes of specific psychological patterns that transform ordinary people into calculating enemies. Understanding these motives doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does make it predictable and therefore manageable. The most common driver of betrayal is envy masquerading as friendship. Your future betrayer watches your life and sees everything they believe they deserve but don't have. Your success becomes evidence of their failure. Your happiness becomes proof of their misery. Your progress becomes a mirror reflecting their stagnation. Carl Jung called this shadow projection, the unconscious process by which people project their own rejected qualities onto others, then attack those qualities externally rather than addressing them internally. The envious betrayer doesn't hate you for your flaws. They hate you for your strengths. Every compliment you receive feels like criticism of them. Every opportunity you're offered feels like opportunity stolen from them. Every relationship you build feels like proof of their social inadequacy. This isn't rational thinking, but human psychology is rarely rational when ego and insecurity are involved. Insecurity drives the second most common type of betrayer. These individuals betray not from strength but from profound weakness. They can't bear to be the least successful person in any relationship, so they destroy relationships where they feel diminished. They can't tolerate being vulnerable, so they attack before they can be attacked. They can't handle genuine intimacy, so they weaponize the closeness others offer them. The insecure betrayer operates from a scarcity mindset that views all relationships as zero-sum games. In their psychological framework, your win must mean their loss. Your strength must mean their weakness. Your happiness must mean their suffering. This distorted thinking creates a world where destroying you feels like saving themselves, Power dynamics drive the third category of betrayal. Machiavelli understood that some people view every relationship through the lens of dominance and submission. For these individuals, betrayal isn't personal, it's political. They betray not because they hate you, but because betraying you advances their position in whatever hierarchy they're trying to climb. The power-driven betrayer sees your trust as leverage and your vulnerability as opportunity. They don't maintain relationships for emotional fulfillment. They maintain them for strategic advantage. When betraying you becomes more profitable than supporting you, they make the switch without emotional turmoil because they never viewed the relationship as genuinely reciprocal in the first place. Perhaps most dangerous are the betrayers driven by what psychologists call narcissistic rage. The fury that erupts when someone with an inflated self-image encounters evidence that contradicts their grandiose self-perception. If you succeed where they failed, if you're praised where they're criticized, if you're chosen where they're rejected, their entire psychological structure feels threatened. The narcissistic betrayer doesn't just want to hurt you. They want to prove that your success was fraudulent, that your relationships are shallow, that your confidence is undeserved. They need to demonstrate that they were always superior and that any evidence to the contrary was the result of unfair advantages, lucky breaks, or systematic bias in your favor. Understanding these motives reveals an uncomfortable truth. The person most likely to betray you is not your obvious rival, but your closest ally who secretly resents your position in their life. They're not your enemy who openly competes with you. They're your friend who quietly compares themselves to you and finds themselves lacking. This is why betrayal feels so shocking. You're looking for threats from people who dislike you, while the real danger comes from people who like the idea of you, but hate the reality of what you represent in their psychological landscape. They don't betray you despite your friendship. They betray you because of what your friendship reveals about their own limitations. You think betrayal is emotional. In truth, betrayal is strategic. And strategy always serves the betrayer's deepest psychological needs, not their stated values or apparent loyalties. Protection from betrayal requires a fundamental shift in how you think about trust and relationships. You must learn to trust strategically rather than completely, to share selectively rather than openly, and to observe behavior rather than believe words. This isn't cynicism. This is survival intelligence in a world where your closest allies might become your most dangerous enemies. First, implement the principle of distributed trust. Never give one person complete access to your vulnerabilities, your plans, or your support systems. The person who knows all your secrets holds all your power. Instead, compartmentalize sensitive information across multiple relationships. Let different people know different aspects of your life, your goals, and your concerns. This way, no single betrayer can destroy everything you've built. Create what intelligence agencies call operational security in your personal relationships. This means controlling information flow based on necessity rather than intimacy. Someone doesn't need to know your financial details just because they know your romantic struggles. A colleague doesn't need access to your family problems just because you work closely together. Intimate feelings don't require intimate intelligence sharing. Second, test loyalty before relying on it. Give people small opportunities to disappoint you before giving them large opportunities to destroy you. Share minor secrets and see who keeps them. Ask for small favors and notice who delivers. Present minor challenges and observe who stands with you. The person who fails these small tests will certainly fail the large ones, but with less devastating consequences. Watch for consistency between private and public behavior. The person who treats you well in private but fails to defend you in public is rehearsing betrayal. The person who praises you to your face but remains silent when others criticize you is preparing to join your critics. True loyalty is consistent across contexts. It doesn't change based on audience or convenience. Third, maintain emotional and practical independence. The person who becomes essential to your happiness, your success, or your daily functioning holds the power to destroy all three. Build multiple streams of support, multiple paths to your goals, multiple sources of validation and assistance. Never become so dependent on one relationship that losing it would devastate your entire life structure. Trust, but never completely. Guard, but never openly. This means maintaining friendly skepticism rather than blind faith. Stay warm and connected while remaining alert and prepared. Enjoy people's company while noting their patterns. Appreciate their support while maintaining your independence. Fourth, control the narrative of your own life. The person preparing to betray you needs others to believe their version of events when the betrayal occurs. They need witnesses to your supposed failures, character flaws, or unreasonable behavior. Counter this by maintaining your own relationships and reputation independent of theirs. Don't let one person become your sole character witness or professional reference. Pay attention to how people talk about others in your presence. The person who gossips about everyone else's secrets will eventually gossip about yours. The person who speaks cruelly about former friends will eventually speak cruelly about you. The person who justifies other people's betrayals is rehearsing justifications for their own. Fifth, develop what Stoics called preferred indifference to betrayal. This doesn't mean expecting it from everyone, but it means not being destroyed by it when it occurs. The person who expects loyalty from everyone will be devastated by anyone's betrayal. The person who appreciates loyalty but doesn't depend on it, psychologically will survive betrayal with their power intact. Remember that the most dangerous betrayers are often the most charming people in your life. They must be skilled at manipulation to get close enough to hurt you effectively. Trust your instincts when something feels too good to be true, too convenient, or too perfectly aligned with what you want to hear. The goal isn't to live in paranoid isolation, it's to engage with people from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. When you're prepared for betrayal, you can enjoy loyalty without being destroyed by its absence. You think protection requires walls. In truth, protection requires wisdom. And wisdom always distinguishes between what people say and what people do, between what you hope for and what you can control. Betrayal doesn't destroy you, it awakens you. The moment someone you trusted reveals their true nature, you cross a threshold that most people never experience. You move from innocence to intelligence, from naivety to navigation, from hoping for the best to preparing for the worst while still building for greatness. This transformation is not optional. Betrayal forces an evolutionary leap in consciousness that changes how you see every relationship, every interaction, every promise made and trust offered. You develop what can only be called betrayal immunity, not because you stop caring about people, but because you stop needing their validation to feel secure in yourself. The person you become after betrayal is more powerful than the person you were before it, because you now understand that survival doesn't depend on others' loyalty. You learn to build success that doesn't require unanimous support. You create happiness that doesn't depend on others' approval. You develop strength that doesn't need external validation to remain intact. Most people fear betrayal because they believe it would break them. But those who have survived it know different truth. Betrayal reveals what was already unbreakable within you. It strips away illusions and dependencies, leaving only what is genuinely yours. Your talent, your intelligence, your resilience, your capacity to rebuild, these cannot be betrayed because they cannot be taken. The transformed individual operates from a position of strategic detachment that others mistake for coldness but is actually clarity. You can still form deep relationships, but you form them as a choice rather than a need. You can still trust people, but you trust them appropriately rather than completely. You can still be vulnerable, but you're vulnerable from strength rather than weakness. Being betrayed is a brutal initiation into wisdom that most people never receive. It teaches you that your security must come from within, that your success must be self-sustaining, and that your happiness must be self-generating. These are lessons that money cannot buy and schools do not teach, but they are worth more than any comfort that betrayal temporarily destroyed. The betrayer thought they were taking something from you. In reality, they gave you something invaluable, the knowledge that you are more powerful than your circumstances, more resilient than your relationships, and more complete than your connections to others. You now know what most people will never learn, that the only person who can truly betray you is yourself, and the only person who can truly save you is also yourself. Everyone else is just playing supporting roles in the story of your becoming. You think betrayal ends your story. In truth, betrayal begins your real story, and that story is written by someone who can no longer be broken by anyone else's choices.